Everyone, we have Jake Villarette on today to talk to us a little bit about co-living, the ups, the downs, the positives. There's so much going on that people don't think about, and I wanted to bring somebody on that has quite a few of these properties to tell us about it. How you doing, Jake?
Doing good, man. Thanks for having me, Paul.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm
So,
excited.
tell the audience a little bit about you and how you got into this realm of co-living.
So I think I probably hopped on the co-living train the same time as everybody else when pad split started becoming a big thing. Um, there's a lot of sub-two deals and creative deals that we're seeing that don't cash flow as a long-term rental. And so we need some sort of exit strategy that is going to make those properties work. And co-living seemed like, the perfect thing. And then you factor in that it's helping people who don't have any other living arrangements or options. And it just seemed like a no-brainer to me.
Awesome. So, before even getting into the real estate world, what were you doing?
I was in the military, I was in the Navy, and then worked at a pharmaceutical plant for 5 years. And then decided I needed to get out of that 9 to 5 life and found sub two and here we are.
Awesome. All right, so let's jump into co-living. And before we even talk about all the positives that everybody sees and these huge profit margins that we all know now aren't so realistic, let's jump into some of the biggest mistakes people are overlooking when looking at the strategy.
Yeah, for sure. I have so many of these. And a lot of it is co-living it's not new, but for a lot of us, it is new, right? Like it's not what we were doing before. So um, just as we did more and more of these, I have 10 or 11 co-living properties now. And so some of the stuff you don't know what you don't know, and you figure it out as you go along. And so I think one of the misconceptions, I'll call it, is that, you know, um, it's not going to be a lot of work. You just put a person in every room and make more money, right? But we've come to realize that there's a lot of little things here and there that, if you're proactive about them, can save you a lot of headache in the future. So a big one for me recently has been making sure that you're checking the zoning issues or zoning laws, I should say, in whatever city or county your property is in. So I know for me in the beginning, I thought, hey, as long as there's no HOA, we're good to go, right? But every city and county out there is going to have its own ordinance and laws and zoning issues and things like that. And so that's been a big one. We've had a couple properties now where it's like, hey, yeah, there's no HOA, and other people are doing co-living properties here, but all it takes is one nosy neighbor to make a phone call to the city, and now you have an issue. So that's been a big one for us, and it's a kind of a pain in the butt to deal with once you're on their radar.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked a lot on this. But really thinking about this, what are the things that maybe you could have avoided or things that you're looking at going into a property that might make this a good co-living property or not a good co-living property? Not just the size of the property, beds and baths, but the neighborhood.
Right. So one of the things we were looking for, I should say, the things that we were looking for are, close to public transportation,
Mhm.
within walking distance, probably a mile or so, let's call it. Um, Enough parking for each member of the house. So if I have 6 bedrooms, I want enough space for 6 cars, whether that's a really big driveway or a neighborhood where everybody parks on the street anyway, things like that, where it's not going to become an issue. Because I've noticed one of the main things that neighbors like to complain about is a lot of cars at the house. All right, that's going to be a big one. The other things that we look for are in or very close to a major metro area where most of your tenants are going to come from, right? They're working jobs in the city. They're maybe contractors or um, more blue collar, and so they need to be close to the city. So that's really the big stuff outside of, no HOA and this many square feet and this many bedrooms and stuff like that. Although I will say we make sure that we have a minimum of 6 bedrooms. That seems to be the sweet spot.
Like where it starts to make sense to actually go from long-term to co-living.
Yeah, I would say 6 bedrooms is where it makes sense to make that switch. Anything less than that, you're always going to be teetering on that brink of like if one thing goes wrong, you're in the red for that month.
Right. Now, when it comes to like the class of neighborhoods, what are you looking for?
I'm looking for, I would say the B minus to C minus neighborhood. Not trying to be in too nice of a neighborhood because you're almost guaranteed to have problems with your neighbors. But you also want to create a safe living environment for your tenants. So in that B to C range.
Yeah, and I mean even when you're talking about creating a safe environment and you want to be in a okay neighborhood, but if you go below that C class neighborhood, it's going to be pretty hard to fill with quality tenants.
Right. Yeah. You still, I mean, we all want to make money, but for me, the bigger priority is helping people who are in need. And part of that is making sure that they're in a safe place.
Yeah.
A lot of them work nights or come home at night from work, and you want to make sure that they feel safe coming home and in their home.
So let's jump on that topic. Do you do anything with security on your properties to help with that?
Exterior cameras, just some exterior cameras wherever the cars are parked. I like to have some security coverage, the front door, obviously, and then in the back of the house.
Okay. Going into one of these properties, you're thinking about buying one. What are you looking for? And not just after everything that you've done so far, because a lot of this has changed, and I want to really want focus on not only the entrance of this, but the possible back end if you have to get rid of this property and it doesn't work. So now, you today, what are you looking for when you're looking for a co-living property?
I'm looking for, and not just with co-living, this is everybody should be doing this with every property. Is it going to work as a long-term rental? Are you at least going to break even as a long-term rental if you have to pivot? So that's a big one. Um, and another thing going into it, I would say is, we're going to be putting a lot of money into these properties up front to convert them. And so either having another exit strategy, whether it's sober living or a group home or something like that, that you could pivot to, or just understanding that, hey, I have to factor this in that, there's a chance I might need some money when it comes time to get rid of this property to convert it back to just what it was before.
Right. So, are you looking at, well, of course, we're talking about putting money into the property, but the less you're putting into the property as far as having to put walls up, changing electrical, HVAC, the less you're going to have to do to convert it back out, right?
Right. So
So,
yeah, that's a big one. In the beginning, and I think a lot of people still think this way, you have to maximize every inch of the property to make as much money as possible. And one of the biggest realizations for me was there's a sweet spot, and I don't need to maximize, just because I could fit 8, 9, 10 bedrooms doesn't mean I should. I really like having a ratio of 3 bedrooms per bathroom, even though, you could in theory do more. 3 to 1 is the sweet spot because you don't want tenants having issues with each other either.
mhm.
Um, and then, like you said, if you keep a common area, whether it's a dining room or a living room, um, and have more space for the tenants to sort of move throughout the property, then when it comes time to convert back, if you need to, there's a lot less work to do.
Definitely. And let's touch on, keeping the tenants happy because you have one property off of pad split, but the rest of your properties are on pad split. So pad split has a pretty hefty upfront fee structure. So let's touch on that a little bit and how important it is to keep your tenants happy because we want them to stay long term.
Right, yeah, especially with the new fee structure. Before it was just basically like a flat 15%. It didn't matter how long tenants stayed in the property for. And now with the new fee structure where you really get dinged if your tenants are moving in and out constantly. And so you want to do things that are going to set your property apart and make sure that they're having a good living experience one of the things we like to do is, refrigerator space always seems to be a problem. So we like to put a mini fridge in each bedroom, a desk for them to sit at. We put TVs in our rooms, just things they're going to make just some more creature comforts for the tenants, right? To make their living experience better and make them want to stay for longer, and try to save on some of those fees from that pad split is taking now if your tenants move out quickly.
Right, because I mean, for people that don't know, I mean, we really didn't cover on what pad split is. I mean, it is co-living, but they do it a little bit differently. Uh, Pad split collects weekly rent, right?
Right.
So there's no lease with pad split. So we really, really need to focus on keeping our tenants happy so they stay there.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And real quick before I forget, going back to maximizing every inch of the house, a lot of those alternative exit strategies like group homes and whatnot actually require like common living areas
Mhm.
where the tenants can commingle. And so that's another reason to not try to get squeeze every bedroom you can in there. Because even if you're going to do a group home or something like that, you're going to have to convert something.
Right.
So another good reason to keep a common area or so.
Definitely. It's not just cost coming in and out. Is if you have to pivot, you should have something you can pivot to. Um, this is going a little bit off topic, but let's cover on it quickly. You're having some issues with one of your properties. And let's talk about how hard it really is to pivot into another strategy. Talking about reserves and such that you have to think about when you are pivoting.
Yeah. Time is the big one, right? Because every day that you don't have those rooms occupied and people paying rent, you're bleeding out, right?
Mhm.
So, um, other exit strategies, like if you're going into the sober living in the group home, a lot of those require like a house manager. You might need a license of some sort, depending on the market that you're in or what services you're going to provide. Um, you might have to, if you've already converted your entire house into bedrooms, you might have to convert some back into living spaces. This stuff takes time, it takes money. Um, even if you want to try to sell the property, you're either going to have to convert it back to a single family home or find someone who wants to do a sober living house and has the experience, and so your buyer pool is much smaller, so it's going to take longer to find that buyer. So you need to make sure you're keeping those reserves in there. And a lot of people too, I think they don't realize when we're buying these sub two homes or any house really, there's a chance that it's been vacant, it's maybe been sitting there for a while. Um, and then you're doing the conversion and it's vacant for a while, and then you're starting to fill the property. And what I didn't realize, and I know a lot of other people aren't thinking about, is the first 3 to 6 months, I would say, when your co-living house is now up and running, you really need to create a buffer for the maintenance costs in that first 3 to 6 months. Things are going to get uncovered that you didn't know about, just from not being used, leaks or, just things breaking. You have 6 or 7 people in your house instead of one or two. And so there's more eyes on everything. There's more people to complain about stuff. And so that first 3 to 6 months is going to be more expensive than once you're finally stabilized and worked out those kinks.
Definitely. Yeah. So I'd say what you're getting at is when you're underwriting these deals to buy one for a co-living, buffer in a good chunk of money that you can keep in reserves because I'm not going to say if things break, things are going to break when you go
You're
from not using a house to overusing a house.
gonna-
So,
For sure. Toilets getting clogged, drains getting clogged, sinks leaking, showers leaking, you name it. So, or, HVAC. So like if you're setting up your co-living house in going into spring and the AC hasn't been running for 6 months and now it's getting hot out and people want air conditioning and the AC is not working. So things
yeah.
like that. I would say for us, we're trying to budget like an extra $1,000 a month or so for that first 3 to 6 months to have that buffer because those maintenance issues are going to pop up.
Yeah. So, we can't always rely on tenants to let us know things too, because sometimes you're having some younger people in these houses or people that just never lived on their own before. and they don't know some problems are problems. So, do you have like inspections or anything to have people walk in the property to see every so often if there's something that needs to be fixed that could become a major problem?
Um, I wouldn't say inspections, but every time somebody moves out of a room, we have a cleaning crew go in there and flip the room and clean the common areas and whatnot. And so sometimes they'll bring things to our attention. And then also our contractors, a lot of the times are the boots on ground for us. And so when they're going and fixing a maintenance issue, one of the most common things, and it sounds so silly, is like the battery's dying in a keypad lock, right? And so they have to go out there. And when they go out there for things like that, they just take a look at everything else and make sure things look okay.
Gotcha. Yeah, that sounds good. Now, let's go back to keeping your tenants happy. You said your mini fridges. What are some of the other things that you're doing? Like, do you set house rules? Like, what are some of the proactive things you're doing to try to keep your tenants all in line and working together well?
Yeah, so no guests, obviously.
Yep.
That just makes it uncomfortable for the other people in the house. So no guests, no pets, no smoking, um, quiet hours, after a certain time, not being so loud. Uh, Really just things like that. Cleaning up, not leaving dishes in the sink, cleaning them right when they're done, cleaning the bathroom when you're done with it, things like that. Just keeping the house tidy.
Gotcha. So I'm gonna bounce one of mine off you and see what you think or if you're having the same problem. I will say one of the biggest problems I'm having with my property is people keeping the common areas clean. People are leaving their personal items in the common areas, even though house rules say no personal items in the common areas. Um, have you had this issue?
Not so much, honestly. I
Okay.
would say the biggest issue I have is people trying to bring guests over.
Yeah.
Like that seems to be a constant. They think they could, sneak somebody in and nobody will notice, and that's really been our biggest one.
Okay. So then you're having people messaging on the platform like so and so as a guest, right?
Right.
And then you have to build a track record. It'd almost be like a judge to be like, well, we have to, you either have to not let guests come over, then they're gonna say they have guests. They didn't have a guest coming over. Like, so that's where I guess cameras could play a role there.
Yeah.
Um, have you ever had to kick somebody out because they just wouldn't, listen to the rules?
Yeah, we've had to remove tenants for not listening to the rules. Smoking in the house, not cigarettes, but other things.
Yep.
Kind of smoke in their room and get away with it, or having a guest over. Um, I'm trying to think of some other things that I've run into that maybe not everybody else has run into before. Oh, here's one: how to handle things. Like for example, if something gets flushed down the toilet that clogs it and creates an overflow or something like that. How, and I don't know if you've dealt with this, like how to handle that. Do you just eat that cost? Do you
And
try to,
that's the
when you
hard
can't
thing.
prove, it's a hard
Yeah.
one. When you can't figure out like who did it, but
Yeah.
it was,
Right.
um,
Like it came out of the toilet. We pulled it out there. We didn't put it there.
right,
But
right.
how do you yeah, because you don't know who did it. You can't prove who did it. There's gonna be a lot of he said, she said. The most I've had was, I have one of my actually luckily because of the way my house is set up, I only have one bathroom where two people have to share. And
Hmm.
somebody said the other person broke the toilet seat. I just, ate the cost. I'm not gonna go trying to charge somebody for a toilet seat. But I think in that case, you pretty much have to eat the cost.
Yeah,
It's hard to charge that to the tenant.
yeah, for sure. And that's what I was getting ready to say. I know people who have tried to sort of divide the bill amongst everybody. And you just have to think about like, is it really worth it? Is it
Right.
worth it to make sure you recoup the $250 you paid a plumber to have half of your house move out because they're pissed
Yeah.
off that they charged for something they didn't do, right? So
Yeah.
that's a big one. That's something that needs to be budgeted for, or at least thought about is, hey, I need to have this money aside for when things like this happen. Because it's a cost I'm gonna have to eat.
Yeah. Yeah. You have people that aren't related living together. The last thing you want to do is give them another reason to be irritated with each other. And money's a big reason because people living in these situations don't have a lot of money. That's why they're here. So, if you charge them 60, $70, each person. That's big for them. So
Yeah, you can't think of it like a normal long-term rental where like you have it's different. It's just different.
yeah.
You can't have the same mindset.
Yeah, and like with pad split and not having a lease, that's just another reason to keep your tenants happy. Not that you want to be a slave to them and do everything, but you kind of have to put yourself in their shoes, right?
Right,
So,
for
um, let
sure.
let's talk about some differences though, because you have that one co-living property that you do have monthly or longer term leases on. And talk about the differences that maybe why you might be leaning that strategy moving forward rather than pad split.
Yeah, I think another thing that people don't realize getting into this is how much work it actually is to operate a co-living house. It's basically like having a short-term rental. It's a business instead of just a passive rental. And so the one property that we have that is not on pad split, I think I want to say some of the tenants are on a 6 month lease and some are on a 12-month lease. They're all have their individual leases. Um, and it's actually run a lot smoother that way. Like people are coming in there, you already know that they're going to be there longer. It's less turnover, less cleaners you have to send out there, so less cost there. And then if you're self-managing, I mean, because really the thing about pad split, the big reason that everyone wants to do the pad split is because they find the tenants, they collect the rent, they do the screening and all of that stuff, right? Well, when you realize that there's a lot of easy ways to market a property, like you could do rent by the room on Zillow now, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist. Like there's a it's not difficult to market these properties. It's not difficult to find the tenants. And there's software that can do background checks and credit checks and things like that for you and even collect the rent. Um, and so I really like having the co-living house that's not on pad split. And this isn't a knock on pad split, right? But it's the same amount of work, but a lot less in fees being paid out, a lot less turnover. And honestly, that property's had a lot less issues.
Yeah.
Um, it's been smoother.
Yeah, I don't have that reference yet since I just moved my property to pad split, but I did have the longer term leases, but I was still using a platform. They were charging me fees, and unfortunately they didn't do very well. I think the biggest thing, and I think you would probably agree, that whether it's pad split, Elcove like I used to, or any other of these platforms, they are not a property manager. And that's where I think
Mm,
a lot of people miss.
for sure. And myself included in the beginning, I thought pad split basically took care of everything. And that's not the case. Right, you're still having tenants message you when things go wrong, they're messaging you. When things need to be fixed, they're messaging you. When they have issues with other tenants, they're messaging you, right? So it's a
Yeah.
really consuming, uh, tedious thing. It's like a full-time job,
Yeah.
especially once you have more than one of these. If you start getting up to, two, three, five, 10, like we have, it's a full-time job.
Right. And I mean, I've only ran in one Airbnb before, and I've done the co-living, had some experience from doing co-living, living in the property, as house hacking, but it's way different when you move out. Now, I will say, like you said, it's like a full-time job. If you do multiple of these, it's really hard to find a property manager if you want to be passive.
Incredibly hard. We were talking about this the other day. I think I probably called 30 property managers in one of the markets we're in and could not find a property manager who would do a rent by the room.
Yeah.
So in some cases you're going to have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I would honestly wish I had kept in mind in the beginning was doing them locally instead of, we have some properties where all of my partners are out of state. And it's incredibly difficult to handle that when you
Yeah.
don't have anybody in the market.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat as you. I'm not going to be doing another co-living out of state. I still want to do it. I think it's a great strategy and very useful in today's economy.
Yeah.
On our side and the tenant side, giving somebody an affordable place to live. But worst case, if you can't get somebody in that property, at least you can get over there and walk it.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
you know what I'm doing right after this, Paul?
What's that?
I have an hour drive to Fayetteville to one of the pad splits. Someone moved out of a room and the dresser is missing and the TV is missing. And so I have to drive to Fayetteville, go pick up a TV, go pick up a new, actually, I have to go pick up a TV and mount it. And then I have to take a desk and a dresser from one of the vacant rooms, put it in the room that we have someone moving in tomorrow, order a new dresser and desk. And then next week I'll have to go bring it over there and put it together.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
yeah. People don't think about that. Like, if you want to even just get a bed set up, in a new room, like I was doing, like luckily I have a good contractor down there that I paid him. Like, hey, while you go fix this, can you just set up that bed that came in that shipped to the porch? So,
mhm,
but yeah, you're simple things like putting some Amazon packages together. You're not there if you're not in that market, and it's going to cost you to have somebody go do it.
right,
Sometimes more than it's going to cost you to buy the stuff. Like,
right, exactly.
yeah,
So,
and
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 it's just,
factor in
right.
Yeah, and factor in higher utility bills. We touched on bills, but other than your co-living in Concord, like with Padswell, you're paying all the utility bills, so people aren't too don't really care how much they're using water, electric, gas, any of that. So
Right. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Completely forgot about that aspect of it. In the one that we're doing that's not on pad split, the utilities are divided evenly amongst the tenants. And so, in some of our pad splits, our utility costs are 800, 900, $1,000 a month. So now if all of a sudden you're taking that back by dividing it amongst the tenants, like, I mean, that's making a huge difference on the monthly bottom line.
definitely. And as far as legal goes, I'm sure this is going to be a jurisdiction by jurisdiction, state, county. How many people can be non-related in each one of these houses? So if you're doing yearly or 6 month leases and they're all not related, like there is different laws in each jurisdiction. So you really have to be mindful of that. So,
Even within the jurisdictions, things are different.
yeah,
So in Fort Worth, the city that we're having trouble with, for our pad split model, we can't have more than five unrelated people living together. We have 8 bedrooms in there, but I forget if it's group home or whatever other exit strategy we were going to do or that we're thinking about doing. You're allowed to have six unrelated, plus you can have the house managers live in the property and have like an office in there too,
yeah,
right? So even within the same city, the rules are different depending on what you're using the property for.
yeah. Yeah, so it's just a lot to think about, and I want people to be very mindful of this. Like you've done a lot of these, so it's a good person to talk on this. Some people have one like me, um, but so many people are seeing all like the bells and whistles, and it's just not all that. So yeah, they're all pad split as great as they are, and the salespeople are. It's a great model, but they are only going to tell you all the good stuff because they want you to come on their platform. So
Right. Right. And that's,
yeah,
I mean, that goes for everybody everywhere, right?
yeah,
And so, I've been on a mission for like the last 8 months. I'm trying to show people all of the things that they're not thinking about, the things that can go wrong, the things that will go wrong, the things that have gone wrong for me. I'm trying to save people time and money and headaches.
yeah,
That's all I care about these days. So,
yeah. That's great, Jake. So if people wanted to reach out and find you or have any questions about what you have going on, how can they do that?
yeah. So, on Instagram, I'm at Jake Villaret, REI. You can message me on Facebook. You can email me, Jake at creativecreditpartner.com. Um,
Cool.
reach out. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll put all that in the description of the video. So before I let you go, real estate or not real estate related, what's one podcast or somebody that you follow, YouTube channel that you really enjoy watching?
Uh, I'm sure everyone's spoken about the real estate ones. I'm a big fantasy football guy. So like
Okay.
if I'm out there driving around, I'm listening to football podcasts and fantasy football podcasts. I like to get my mind off of real estate when I'm not having to work. So,
Gotcha. Awesome. And that's so important as well.
yeah.
All right, Jake. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on today, and good luck with your drive. Hope you get your pad split down there working out.
Thanks, Paul. Keep crushing it, man. You're doing awesome.
Thanks.